My name is Tarmack, and this is a PC review of the complete version of Hitman, or Season 1 if you prefer. Review code was provided by Square Enix, and the system specs for the footage is in the description, but in short, it's an i7-5820K with 16GB of RAM and a GTX 970. We have to start by talking about the elephant in the room on Hitman, because I've actively avoided covering this game until now. Hitman was not released as a traditional product, but instead took a games-as-a-service platform concept. They split the campaign into 6 full-size missions with an opening set of 2 tutorial levels. These 6 missions were released periodically in sort of a DLC fashion where you could buy the whole game as a season pass or purchase individual missions as they came out. So now, as of October 31st, you can buy the full game on Steam or the Humble Store with all missions for $59.99 US, and it's also available on PS4 and Xbox One. This time around, Hitman is a much wider scope game than just the story missions. I'll go over each piece, but in short, there's a story campaign, the return of contracts, and we've also got new additions in the elusive targets and escalations. The campaign mode starts off with a couple of tutorial maps to get your feet wet and follows that up with 6 missions. This is a lot less than Hitman normally gets, but it's offset a bit by having very large map areas with more variety than something like Absolution ever even could dream of for methods to approach the targets. Difficulty options are gone this time around and are replaced by being able to turn off minimap, NPC visibility, notifications when NPCs are suspicious, and such, as well as turning off focus, which is the ability to see NPCs through walls. And these campaign missions are great fun. I don't want to spoil anything, but seeing the inside and outside of a giant mansion big enough for a fashion show to be going on inside and then moving on to other areas like a large NPC-packed open-air market in Marrakesh was really a sight to behold. The story isn't anything revolutionary, but it's not bad at all, and I had a blast playing through in both stealth and more run-and-gun style of play. I will say that the shift away from the complete edition to Season 1 is a bit disappointing, and without spoiling anything, Season 1 does end on a cliffhanger. The contracts mode is expanded heavily from what appeared in Absolution. This time around, the searchability of available contracts is improved so much that it makes contracts actually fun, whereas in Absolution I didn't like them at all. For those who don't know, this mode is one where you as a player can create a custom mission for other people to play that is then pushed to gamers via the online service. You can search by what kinds of contract you want, narrowing down to what kinds of weapons you want to use for the hit, and what kind of disguise must be used. It is so much better, and being able to properly search it is great. The new features are also really well designed. Elusive targets are kind of like celebrity hits, sort of. One in particular is Gary Busey because everybody wants to go after him. The elusive targets are a time-limited event that you can participate in, but that are not available afterwards. This has caused some consternation amongst the player base, as not everyone has a great internet connection and you do need to be online for these. That's an issue I'll talk about in great detail towards the end of this video. Also, it's frustrating to see these great elusive target missions that were in the past, and I really don't see the value in IO Interactive keeping them locked out. It strikes me as something that could be turned into a rotating feature that comes back every couple of months for past elusive target missions. And to make matters worse for you, in a difficulty sense, if the contract ends by either you or the target dying, you cannot do the contract again. So, you can restart it after doing some scouting, but if you get seen and killed, you get to wait another few weeks until the next elusive target comes along. You can also not save during the elusive target missions, so make sure you're ready to do it in one shot. Normally, I don't like time-limited or attempt-limited game features, but there's enough contract variety in Hitman that the addition of something like this not only feels in character, but also like a great challenge that forces gamers to maybe try things in a different way, and it makes it really feel like your attempt matters. And escalations are the second brand new addition, which give a level of scaling difficulty for missions pushed to the client by IO Interactive. An escalation mission is a mission that you will complete multiple times, but with an increasing level of difficulty each time. The first time it might be to handle the target in any way you see fit, but with a security uniform. Second time it might be with a security uniform and maybe a specific weapon, or that you can only have the security uniform on for 60 seconds before performing the hit. And each of the 5 levels you progress through for a given escalation is harder than the last one. It really forces you to plan the mission out and your route well in advance. And with that difficulty, saving, of course, during the missions is disabled. Now, there is a second elephant in the room with Hitman, or maybe you could call it a woolly mammoth because it's that big of an issue in my opinion. The only content that you can access in Hitman in offline mode is the single-player story campaign. If you're online and you lose connection, you'll be dropped from the mission you're currently in, including the story missions, and you have to start it again in offline mode. Your offline and online saves are also not compatible, so if you have to play a bunch in offline mode, you can't use those saves when online either. This is a known issue, and IO Interactive and Square Enix have confirmed they will not be fixing it. Rather, I suspect it is intended functionality. This introduces some problems. Hitman is of course entirely a single-player experience with a core story campaign. This time though, the story campaign is only 6 main maps and can be played through rather quickly if you're not keen on perfection the first time. The bulk of the content is in the size of the maps, the community-driven contracts, and developer-made elusive and escalation missions, which all take place in the same 6 maps. All of this extra content is online only, and only about 30 to 40% of the worthwhile content you get with Hitman, in my opinion, is available as offline content. Hitman is based heavily on unlocks. When you finish a mission and you get all of those weapons, hidden cash, starting points, and such, that's where the real variety in mission design and planning out hits comes into the game. Being able to plan out missions with specific targets and setting up hidden weapon caches is great fun. When you're in offline mode though, you can't unlock anything. All of the challenges become worthless when you're offline. Now, I've said before that the game is online only, and I'm correcting that with this part of the video. It's not quite online only for the whole game. But with how much content is effectively online gated here, it really is close, and I know that for some people that's a deal breaker. What I do not agree with is that it needed to be this way. Obviously, they need to protect the integrity of the leaderboards, but gating content is not needed. Just let people flag a run as a leaderboard run and let the unlocks exist outside of that ecosystem. At the very least, make sure that online and offline saves are somewhat compatible. This strikes me as DRM in disguise to protect the integrity of how they intended to release new content, and I'm never impressed when that happens because it means they can take a very sizable chunk of the game away when the game is no longer profitable to support its own servers. Now, for options and performance, you've got standard resolution options, full screen and windowed, and the usual suspects for various levels of graphic customization. Level of detail and texture quality, FXAA and SMAA for anti-aliasing, anisotropic filtering, ambient occlusion, and a couple of settings for shadow quality. Volume settings has sliders for master, effects, and music, and they've subtitled everything, which is good. The keyboard keys can all be rebound, and you can change up the mouse sensitivity at your leisure. And in addition to that, all game difficulty options, as I mentioned earlier, are handled by individual toggles under the gameplay options section. There's a lot of customization here for those who want a bit more of a challenge. As far as performance is concerned, I've started to become keenly aware that my GTX 970 can in many cases no longer provide 60 frames per second on ultra settings. I got close to ultra in Gears of War 4, but that's the pinnacle of PC optimization in recent years in my opinion. Hitman is not a game that looks better than Gears did by any stretch of the imagination, but it does have a few things going for it that Gears didn't even attempt, which is the verticality and size of the levels and the sheer number of NPCs that can be on the screen at any one time. Gears was relatively low on NPC counts and entirely linear in area design. I certainly had and maintained 60 frames per second in Hitman, but in order to get that I had to drop the texture quality from high to medium, anti-aliasing off, and both shadow maps and resolution to medium as well. That got me 60 frames per second without more than a frame or two drop on the odd occasion. The game still looks great with these settings, don't get me wrong. I'm just disappointed that I needed to go that far to get 60 frames per second. The thing is, I think that I'm already at the point now where I can't necessarily blame the developer for these things. It may just be time to upgrade the video card. So here's a quick summary. The story is a lot of fun to play through, especially the last mission, and I've spent a grand total of about 18 hours in it so far. The areas are huge with a lot of variety in what actions you can do and how you complete those missions. The contracts mode is vastly improved, especially in the area of searchability for the kinds of contracts that you want, and the new elusive target and escalation modes add variety as IO Interactive adds more missions. But amid all of that, there's a huge problem with how they handled save files. Because of the mismatch between online and offline saves, people who either have a spotty internet connection or are concerned about a potential future where game servers aren't always around when you need them, be aware that the majority of content in Hitman is online only, and it all gets cordoned off when you lose your connection. That, and it ends on a pretty big cliffhanger, so it's worth considering that they just recently changed everything for Hitman to read Season 1 instead of Complete version. So buying this is supporting that kind of business model. It has no microtransactions, but it's single player, and that's how it always should be. I am conflicted in a pretty bad way here. The game is great, and if that's all I had to consider, well, I think my view on this would be pretty obvious. The problem is that the online requirement for an entirely single-player game frosts me too much. And how the entire model is turned into a leveraged Walking Dead Telltale style design means that you can never get a full complete product because that online structure, it's effectively DRM to protect the long-term sustainability of how they built the game as a platform. I'm sticking to my guns that single-player games should never be on the chopping block such that they can be taken away even in part when a company no longer wants to run the servers. Thus, I cannot recommend it on that basis, which kind of sucks. Thanks for checking out my review of Hitman 2016 Season 1 by IO Interactive and Square Enix. You'll find it on Steam and the Humble Store for $59.99 USD. Please stick around the channel as I do produce content quite regularly. On that note, though, I'll take this time to let everybody know that I'll be at BlizzCon this weekend, which means no Feature Creeper news wrap-up. That said, if you happen to be going and see someone in a gnome shirt at BlizzCon, it's probably me, so come say hi. My name's Tarmack. Thanks for watching.